They miss you in silence. And they'll never say it. It doesn't begin with grand declarations. It doesn't come with loud apologies or messages. It starts in the quiet moments, those instances when their phone lights up and it's not you, when the noise of their world fades, and all that's left is the emptiness they can no longer escape. They smile, they post, they laugh, they move on. But in the back of their minds, the silence speaks. And it speaks louder than any words could. You felt it too, haven't you? That silence that once felt like an unbearable weight, the silence that made you question your value, the silence that made you wonder if they ever even thought of you, if they missed you at all. The truth is, they think about you all the time. They just won't admit it. And why? Because for them, admitting they miss you would mean admitting they've lost control. And an ego, fragile as theirs, can never afford to lose control. They thought you'd always be there, always available, always reaching out, always explaining, always fixing the cracks they kept breaking. But when you stopped, that's when everything changed. The silence that once served as their weapon to manipulate you now becomes their torment. That's when their ego begins to crack. Power isn't about being loud. It's about restraint. The silence you choose becomes the loudest thing in the room. They don't understand that. They think if they ignore you long enough, if they distract themselves with their own life, you'll disappear. But that's the trick. Silence doesn't make you vanish. It forces them to confront their own loneliness, their own fear, the fear of losing control. When you stopped chasing, when you stopped explaining, that's when they started to question. They'll pretend they're fine. They'll post happy pictures, share meaningless jokes, act like nothing ever changed. But deep inside, they're wondering why you're not reacting. They'll scroll through your posts, checking your profile, pretending it's random. They'll hear your name and try to brush it off, but it stings. That's the power of silence. It forces them to feel the regret they can never admit. And while they're in their head, fighting themselves, you're learning how to protect your peace. You're evolving quietly, inwardly. The silence that once seemed like punishment has transformed into your strength, your shield, your sanctuary. It's where you find clarity. It's where you regain your power. They'll never admit it, but that silence you created, it broke them. It showed them what they could never handle: emotional maturity, self-respect, and peace without validation from others. They thought you'd crumble, that they could walk away and you'd chase them down, pleading for attention. But you didn't. And that, more than anything, haunts them. Ego collapses in silence, not with a loud explosion, but with a slow, painful unraveling. They'll act like they've moved on. They'll tell themselves they're fine. But each time they check your last scene, each time they replay memories in their minds, the weight of their own regret sinks deeper. It's a quiet, internal collapse. And you're not there to witness it. You're busy rebuilding. You're busy creating the life they thought they could control. And that scares them. They miss you in silence, not because they want to reconcile, but because they can't control you anymore. They've lost access to the version of you who was willing to beg for their attention. That version is gone. The new you is at peace. The new you isn't waiting, isn't chasing, isn't explaining. The new you understands that silence is the greatest form of control. The silence reveals what they never saw in you: your strength, your independence, your quiet authority. And that's what makes them miss you. It's not just the absence of your presence. It's the absence of their ability to manipulate you. It's the realization that the power they once had over you has completely evaporated. The silence that once felt like a weapon they used to control you now becomes their punishment. Every time they think they've moved on, every time they post something to prove they don't care, they realize something. The void you left behind isn't just an absence. It's a transformation. And that transformation, it's what they'll never admit. They miss the peace you gave them. They miss the calm you brought into their chaos. And they miss you, not because they want you back, but because your silence has become the mirror they can't escape. That silence is teaching them lessons they'll never speak aloud. It's showing them the difference between love and control, between emotional connection and manipulation. They never thought you could be this strong, this self-sufficient. But here you are, living your life, learning new things, growing stronger every day. And the hardest part for them? They'll never be able to admit it out loud. The ego hates silence because silence doesn't lie. It doesn't protect them. It reveals them. It reveals their fear, their regret, and the truth they can't hide. While they try to distract themselves, you're focused on your own growth. And that is what they can't stand. They'll keep trying to pull you back in, testing your boundaries, sending little messages to see if they still have control. But you don't fall for it anymore. Now you know the power of silence. You understand that not reacting doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care about yourself more. It means you value your peace over the noise. It means you've learned emotional control, and that makes you untouchable. So let them wonder. Let them scroll through your social media, replay old conversations, and wonder where they went wrong. You've already won. Not by confronting them, not by explaining your worth, but by learning that your silence is the most powerful weapon you'll ever wield. They miss you in silence. But by the time they realize what they lost, you've already moved on. You've already become the person they'll never have access to again. You've become untouchable, not by shouting, but by mastering your silence. They miss you in silence, not because they want to admit their feelings, but because silence is all they have left to hold on to. The pride they cling to won't allow them to show vulnerability. It's not that they don't care, it's that they don't know how to admit it without feeling weak. They've convinced themselves that ignoring you, avoiding any real connection, is their way of staying in control. But what they fail to realize is that silence isn't control. It's a slow unraveling. When you walk away, when you stop reacting to the drama, stop chasing the validation they were offering in bits and pieces, you've already won the battle. You may think they're out there living their life unaffected, but the truth is they're not. They're living in the quiet echo of your absence, the emptiness that follows when someone who truly mattered to them stops fighting for them. You've given them all the space they need to understand themselves, to confront their own inner turmoil. And while they may try to fill that space with distractions, new people, more parties, more social media posts, they can never escape the reality of what they lost. It's hard for them to comprehend that the thing they wanted the most, the thing that once gave them power over you, is the very thing that now brings them the most discomfort, your peace. The ego will try to make sense of it, trying to convince them that they were right, that they were the one in control. But the longer the silence stretches, the more the cracks in their narrative begin to show. They'll start to feel the absence of your presence in ways they didn't expect. They'll feel it when they're alone with their thoughts, when the noise of the world fades, and they are left with nothing but the raw truth of their own actions. For the first time, they're forced to see themselves clearly. They no longer have the comfort of projecting their insecurities onto you. They can't blame you for their unhappiness or for the things that went wrong. They have no one else to blame. The silence leaves them alone with the reality of who they are, and they can't hide from it anymore. And that's where the pain begins. It's not the pain of missing you. It's the pain of facing the parts of themselves that they've avoided for so long. The parts they used to hide behind masks of pride, arrogance, and emotional distance. The silence you've created isn't a void, it's a mirror. It reflects their weaknesses, their regrets, and all the things they never wanted to confront. This is why they'll never admit it. They'll never admit that they miss you because to do so would be to acknowledge that they were wrong, that they didn't see your value until it was too late. They'll never admit that the control they once had over you was never really control at all. It was manipulation, and now that manipulation has lost its power. They may try to play it off, laugh it off, act like they've moved on, but they haven't. They can't. Every time they check their phone and don't see your name, every time they replay those moments in their minds, it all comes rushing back. They remember the warmth of your presence, the security of your support, and the love that once filled the empty spaces in their life. But now that space is filled with something much darker, the cold, biting truth of what they lost and what they never thought they would need until it was gone. Their ego is fragile, and it's built on the foundation of control. But what they don't realize is that true power doesn't come from control. It comes from letting go. It comes from embracing the silence, from knowing that not every situation requires a reaction. Not every wound needs to be healed by external validation. The power of silence lies in its ability to create space for growth and self-reflection, to teach both the one who stays silent and the one who's left behind the true nature of strength. And so, as the silence continues, the ego starts to bend. It begins to question itself. It begins to lose its grip on the narrative it once held so tightly. And with each passing day, the ego becomes smaller, weaker, until it eventually collapses under the weight of its own pride. What remains in its place is something far more profound. It's a quiet strength that no one can take away. It's the kind of strength that comes from within, from knowing that you don't need anyone else's approval to be whole. You don't need validation from someone who can't even see your worth until it's too late. This is the power of strategic silence. It's not about revenge or anger. It's about peace, self-respect, and the ability to walk away from situations that no longer serve you. It's about understanding that you don't need to fight for love, for connection, or for anyone's attention. When you stop chasing, when you stop explaining, you leave space for the truth to come forward, for the people who are meant to be in your life to show up, and for you to focus on becoming the best version of yourself. The person who used to manipulate you with their silence is now faced with the consequences of their actions. They'll never admit it to you, but they're haunted by the absence of your energy, the absence of your presence. They can no longer fill that void with distractions or half-hearted attempts at moving on. You've taken away their access to you, and that is the ultimate form of control. It's not about punishing them. It's about taking back your power. It's about choosing your peace over the chaos they once brought into your life. And while they try to convince themselves that they don't care, that they've moved on, you're busy building the life you always deserved. You're focused on growth, on healing, on becoming someone who no longer relies on external validation to feel worthy. You've learned that the most powerful thing you can do is to stay still, to stay quiet, and to let your actions speak louder than any words ever could. And as they struggle to come to terms with what they've lost, you continue to rise, stronger and more confident than ever before. The real irony here is that while they thought your silence was their punishment, it was actually your gift. You gave them the space to reflect, to understand the depth of their actions, and to confront the very things they've been running from for so long. And in doing so, you've given yourself the greatest gift of all, peace. As the days go by and the silence stretches between the two of you, it's hard for them not to notice the shift. It's a subtle thing at first. They might still pretend it doesn't affect them. They may continue with the same facade they've been putting on for so long, convincing the world they are fine, convincing themselves they're better off without you. But deep down, the silence starts to crack their image. The image they've tried to project, the confident, unbothered, in control individual, is now fragile. They can't maintain the act for long. It's exhausting, pretending they don't care when every single part of their being is screaming for you. Every time they open their phone, they are reminded that you're not there anymore. And it doesn't matter how many times they tell themselves they're fine, the absence of your presence stings in ways they never expected. They start replaying old conversations, looking through pictures, reading through old messages. The nostalgia is unbearable. It's not that they want you back, they've convinced themselves they don't need you, but they can't stop wondering why they don't feel the way they did when you were there. What they don't realize is that the distance you've put between the two of you wasn't just physical, it was emotional. And that emotional distance has forced them to see themselves through a lens they've been avoiding for so long. You see, before, they could blame you for everything that went wrong. They could project their insecurities onto you, making you the scapegoat for their unhappiness. But now, with you gone, that narrative no longer holds. They can't blame you for their mistakes, their missed opportunities, their unresolved feelings. They can only look at themselves and ask, how did I let this slip away? The silence forces them to face the raw truth, the truth they buried beneath layers of pride and ego. They're not as invincible as they once thought. They are just as fragile, just as vulnerable, and just as human as anyone else. The ego doesn't like this. The ego resents being exposed. So it fights back. It creates new stories, new distractions, new excuses. But at the end of the day, they can't escape what they've done. They can't escape the fact that you were once their anchor and now you're gone, and all they have left is the emptiness they tried so hard to avoid. And this is where it gets complicated for them. Because in that silence, they begin to realize that you don't need them. You're no longer searching for validation. You don't need to explain yourself, to justify your actions. You don't need to chase them, to seek their approval, or to fight for a place in their life. You've learned the most difficult lesson of all. You don't need anyone else to validate your worth. You've become enough for yourself. That realization is what makes them panic. The truth that you're okay without them, that you can exist, thrive, and grow without needing them to complete you, is the ultimate blow to their ego. Because the one thing they never counted on, the one thing they never expected, was your ability to stand on your own. For a long time, they believed that they were the source of your strength, that your happiness was somehow tied to them. But now, as the silence continues, they see it differently. They see that your strength didn't come from them. It came from within. It came from your own resilience, your own sense of self. You're no longer chasing the love they refuse to give you. You're no longer waiting for their approval, their attention, or their affection. You've realized that you're enough, exactly as you are. And that realization, that you no longer need them, is the most powerful thing they will ever witness. Because it shows them that their power over you is never real. It was an illusion. The silence you've created isn't punishment, it's liberation. It's a declaration that you are in control of your own life, your own emotions, and your own happiness. The longer they try to hold on to their facade, the more it crumbles. They can't pretend anymore. They can't distract themselves with new relationships, new friendships, new experiences. They can't escape the fact that the only person they truly wanted to be with is no longer waiting for them. The absence of your energy is louder than any words they could say. They can't deny it anymore. They can't lie to themselves anymore. The silence begins to transform from something they once used to control you into something they can no longer ignore. It becomes a reminder of their own inadequacies. It forces them to confront the truth. They lost someone who truly understood them, someone who truly cared for them. And no matter how hard they try to bury that truth, it remains. It lingers in the back of their mind, in every quiet moment, in every reflection of their own failure. They'll try to justify it to themselves. They'll try to convince themselves that it was the right decision to let you go, that they are better off without you. But deep down, they know it's a lie. They know they'll never find anyone who gave them the same kind of love, the same kind of loyalty, the same kind of peace that you did. And that right there is the moment the ego begins to collapse. The moment they realize that you were never the problem. The problem was always within them. Their own fears, their own insecurities, their own inability to open up and be vulnerable. It was their ego that kept them from seeing the value in what you offered. It was their pride that kept them from recognizing how much you meant to them until it was too late. But now, in the silence, they have no choice but to face it. They have no choice but to look in the mirror and see themselves for who they truly are. And that's the moment the ego begins to break. That's the moment when they begin to understand the consequences of their actions. And that's when you begin to rise. Because while they are stuck in their own confusion, in their own regrets, you are moving forward. You are no longer trapped in the cycle of doubt, of seeking approval, of wondering if you're enough. You've already answered that question for yourself. You are enough. You always have been. The power you've gained from your silence, from your ability to walk away and let go, is the kind of power that comes from within. It's the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself, that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. It's the kind of power that radiates from a place of peace, of emotional control, and of self-love. They may never admit it. They may never say the words, "I miss you." But you don't need to hear them. You already know the truth. And the silence, the space between you, is all the evidence you need. The moment their ego collapses, you will be standing there, stronger, wiser, and more at peace than ever before. As the silence stretches on, it's as if the air around you becomes thicker with every passing day. You're no longer chasing anything, and in that stillness, something incredible begins to happen. It's not that you're ignoring your emotions or suppressing your needs. It's that you've found something far more powerful: emotional sovereignty. You've taken ownership of your feelings. You've learned the art of restraint, of choosing peace over chaos, of choosing healing over hurt. And in doing so, you've detached yourself from the very forces that used to hold you captive. In the beginning, silence might have felt like a prison. It might have felt like an emptiness that only made you ache with longing. But over time, you began to understand it differently. You began to see silence not as the absence of communication, but as a powerful space in which growth could occur. The silence wasn't just the absence of the other person, it was the space you needed to find yourself again. It was the space that allowed you to rebuild, to reconnect with your values, to recenter your sense of worth and purpose. What the person who walked away didn't realize is that silence is not just about them, it's about you. It's about understanding that you don't need external validation to affirm your worth. You don't need to chase after someone's love or attention. The moment you realize that you are complete on your own, that you don't need anyone else to define you, that's when everything begins to shift. The silence becomes your sanctuary. It becomes the place where you reclaim your power, where you rediscover the strength that was always within you. They thought their silence would break you, that by withdrawing, they would diminish your sense of self. But the truth is, their silence has only illuminated your strength. It has shown you how much power you have when you stop looking outward for approval and start looking inward. And that, my friend, is where the real growth begins. The moment you stop trying to prove anything, stop explaining yourself, stop chasing after someone who isn't interested in meeting you halfway, that's when your life begins to transform. Because here's the thing, when you stop reacting, when you stop feeding into the cycle of emotional manipulation, you take away the power they once had over you. You stop being the one who is controlled by their actions, and instead, you become the one in control of your own emotions, your own reactions. It's not about being cold or indifferent. It's about protecting your peace, about realizing that some battles aren't worth fighting, and some people aren't worth engaging with. This is where they begin to realize they've lost control. The silence that once served as their weapon to control the dynamic between you and them now becomes their greatest enemy. Because silence, when chosen consciously, is the loudest statement you can make. It's the loudest form of self-respect, of emotional maturity, and of strength. It's a statement that says, I will no longer fight for your attention. I will no longer beg for your love. I am whole without you, and I will move on with or without you. And the moment they realize that, the moment they come to terms with the fact that you've moved on without them, that's when the panic begins. That's when the regret starts to seep in. The realization that they've lost you is more painful than they could have ever imagined. Because they didn't just lose a relationship or a connection. They lost someone who truly saw them for who they are, someone who is willing to stay, to fight, to love them with all their flaws. And now, that person is no longer chasing them. That person has moved on, healed, and evolved. What happens next is a process they may never fully understand. They'll wrestle with their pride, their ego, and their regrets. They'll tell themselves they don't care, that they're fine, but inside, they know the truth. They know that what they once had was special. They know that they were lucky to have had someone who gave them so much, and they know they've lost it. And while they may never admit it, they'll always carry that regret, that gnawing feeling of having let go of something valuable, something irreplaceable. It's the great irony of life. The more you try to control something, the more you push it away. The more you try to hold on to something that's slipping through your fingers, the more it eludes you. And that's exactly what happens when you stop chasing, when you stop reacting, when you stop fighting to keep something alive that was never meant to last. In the silence, you allow yourself the freedom to walk away from what no longer serves you, and you give yourself permission to move forward. This is the power of absence. It is the invisible force that shifts the dynamic between two people. It's the quiet realization that some things are simply not meant to be, and that's okay. You don't have to fight for what isn't fighting for you. You don't have to explain yourself to people who will never understand your worth. The moment you accept this truth is the moment you become unstoppable. The moment you realize that you are enough, exactly as you are, is the moment you begin to thrive. They will try to make sense of it. They will wonder why you're not chasing after them anymore, why you're not responding to their attempts to pull you back. But the truth is, they'll never understand the quiet strength you've gained. They'll never understand the peace you've found in letting go. And that's what makes you so powerful. You no longer need their approval. You no longer need their attention. You've learned to validate yourself. This is the point of no return. You've crossed over into a place where you no longer seek validation from external sources. You are no longer dependent on anyone else to affirm your value. And in that space, you are free. free from the noise, free from the drama, free from the manipulations, and free from the need to explain yourself. You are free to be exactly who you are, to live the life you deserve, and to attract the people who truly appreciate you for who you are, not for what you can give them. And here's where the ego collapse truly happens. It's not a single moment. It's a process, a slow unraveling of the layers they've built to protect themselves from their own vulnerability. But with each passing day, with each time they look at their phone and realize you're no longer there, the cracks in their armor become more and more apparent. They realize that they've lost someone who truly loved them, who truly cared for them, who wasn't afraid to show them the depth of their affection. And the regret they feel is almost unbearable. What they will never admit, though, is that they pushed you away. They will never admit that they were the ones who made the choice to walk away first, to shut you out, to keep you at arm's length. They will never admit that their pride, their fear, and their ego were what destroyed the connection between the two of you. They will blame it on timing, on circumstance, on everything else but the truth. They were afraid to be vulnerable, afraid to open up, and afraid to lose control. But that's the beauty of silence. It doesn't need to explain itself. It doesn't need to justify its existence. It just is. And in its quiet power, it teaches them more than any words ever could. It forces them to face the truth. It forces them to confront the very thing they were avoiding all along, their own fears, their own insecurities, and their own inability to accept love when it was given freely. And in the end, the one who stays silent, the one who learns to let go and move forward, is the one who wins. They may never admit it, but deep down, they will know that the silence you've created has changed everything. It has broken them, not because of what you did, but because of what you didn't do. You didn't chase after them. You didn't beg for their attention. You didn't need them to complete you. And in that, you've become untouchable. You've become the version of yourself they could never control, the version of yourself they can never have.